and we work in an array of areas where our work covers consultancy services. We structure monitoring and evaluation projects and programs. We lead a learning academy, which is passionate about building capacity in the education sector, and where we also organize a host of convenings to bring all the different members of the public and the non-state sector together. In addition, we're also very, very keen on research, and this is what has really incentivized the conversation that we're having today and propelled us to work in partnership with our great collaborators at NESG to put together this exercise, the survey. I must say from the outset, a huge thank you to the Hewlett Foundation for their generous support of this exercise. And of course, as we go further on during the day, we will have a proper vote of thanks for everyone who's made this a possibility. So right now, I'd like to welcome Mr. Laoye Jayola for his own opening remarks. Mr. Jayola is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, also known as NESG, which is a private sector-led, non-profit and non-partisan think tank organization that has a mandate to promote and champion the reform of the Nigerian economy so that it becomes an open and a globally competitive economy. He is currently a member of the Central Working Group on the Medium-Term National Development Plan 2021 to 2025, and also the Nigeria Agenda 2050. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, CIBN, and the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICANN, as well as a member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers in Scotland, and a fellow of the Senior Executive Program at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Mr. Jayola, you're welcome to make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Mo, and thank you for inviting us, me in particular, to do those remarks. And I want to stand on let me appreciate everyone, the speakers, the panelists, and everybody that's been invited to witness this lunch. And I will start first by appreciating the work that the Education Partnership Center is doing, and the fact that you are both very passionate about how do we ensure that we enhance the environment of of education in Nigeria. And that's why we are collaborating with you. So I want to thank you because, as a matter of fact, our hands were in too many things during the pandemic, and education were concerned about it, but because of your passion, you kept hammering on us, no, you need to look at it, and that's what is giving back to the report that we are launching today. So we thank you for bringing that up. I want to say that when, what started like a joke towards the end of 2019, it had some significant implications for the entire world, including Nigeria. Yes, a lot of people talked about the health implication, but we've seen it roll from health to humanitarian to economic to even security. So it's gone through all four dimensions and have very many implications for the world and Nigeria in particular. But like we all say, it just only revealed the underbelly. Some of the problems we're grappling with today, whether it be the health, be the education, were things we had in the country before, but they then became so evident when this pandemic is come. It's around us. At NESG, we've done quite a number of research at both macro, at sectorial, and even at household level to look at what is the implication and how do we then position Nigeria to ensure that never again should we find ourselves this exposed. So I want to thank you very, very well for the work that you have done. Now, in terms of the implication for Nigeria, you realize that prior to that, we were going to spend about 10.8 trillion in our budget. And we thought that the gap we were going to look for was just something around 3 trillion because we are told revenue should bring about 8 trillion. But unfortunately, what we found out was that apart from the pandemic, we saw a significant decline in oil and we're now borrowing everywhere. So now we haven't covered that gap. But people are busy looking at education, at economy. But then if you look at education, until that time, Nigeria had over 13 million out of school children that were grappling with. And one of the things that we found out is that in addition to that, over 35 million people were thrown out during this pandemic when we had to lock down. So imagine a nation grappling with 13 million, now you have thrown about 36 million. So we're in the main, we're dealing with over 50 million people to deal with. How do we ensure that they can have learning experiences in spite of the lockdown? Unfortunately, our infrastructures were poor, internet access was not difficult, and we realized that beyond that, even the pedagogy of learning and other things were things that we have issues with before now. And that really encouraged us and to look at what is it that the various governments have done. I want to commend the fact that at the federal and the state level, every one of us rolled in one kind of interventions or the other. So the purpose of this research was really to really look at the interventions that were rolled out. How effective were they? And for me, it's just a start. I remember as I said, you could have reached out more people. We got about 1,900 respondents. We covered about 35 cities. Oh, yes, I want to have as many respondents as possible. But given the pandemic, given the fact that people could not move around, given the challenges of even reaching out to people, I consider the 1,900 respondents that replied as something that was commendable. So people can always work on it. And so the essence of this report, and somebody is going to talk about this report exclusively. I think it's will tell you what the report is. So my job is not to look at the report, but to tell us that, look, for us, it's a learning plan. And at the end of it, we want to ask ourselves, so what, from that exercise, what worked and why? There are lessons we want to grab. What worked and why? Where did we fail and why? What is the way forward? Which way forward? And who does what? Because for any these are the things that we're concerned about. Having examined situations, we always like to have a responsibility metrics and see who does what, how do we do it. So I want to thank you for partaking in this opening and launch of this report. But for us, it's a first step because we're going to take it forward to see who does what, how can we enhance it. Evidently, a number of things has been revealed. The way we do learning, the way we reach out need to change. And so this is just a beginning of a conversation. And I want to thank, like Mo said, the Hewlett Foundation for the support. And please, it's all about partnership. The Educational Partnership Center is about partnership. NESG is about partnership. There is enough for all of us to collaborate. Knowing one thing, that it is in the interest of the nation, it is in the interest of Nigeria that we all are looking at. So I want to commend all of us. Thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to a very, very exciting season, listening to all of you. I know many of us have experiences and we can learn and share from each other and then together determine which way forward. So I thank you again and I look forward to a very, very interesting discussion this morning. Thank you. Or this afternoon or morning or wherever you are. All right. Thank you, Mo. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jayola, for those wonderful opening remarks that I think really set the tone for today's conversation. And thank you for being an organization at NESG that truly values the ideals of partnership. We appreciate it. So now we are going to move into the actual presentation of the findings of the report. And to do that will be my colleague, Miss Bridget Zubike. I will tell you a little bit about Bridget before she takes the stage. Bridget Zubike is a research professional. She's got over 7 years of experience as a quantitative researcher, and she's worked with the University of Oxford as a quantitative research assistant, supporting the education team to design and implement surveys in Ethiopia, India, and Vietnam. She leads the research team at TEP Centre and has coordinated several research projects, trainings, and managed research field teams as well. In addition, she is the founder and lead facilitator of Unlearn 360, which is a startup education company with a mission to bridge research and employability skills gaps among graduates in Nigeria. Bridget is, in addition to all of the things that she does, also a published author of a book entitled From Student to Research Pro, an accessible guide to the world of social research. And so Bridget is going to spend about 20 minutes giving us the highlights of the survey which we are launching the report of today. Bridget, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm hoping that my slides are going to be projected on the screen. Okay, thank you. Do you mind giving us the screen? Okay. All right, thank you so much for that. I would like to welcome everyone once again to this launch of our report, Learning in a Pandemic, Nigeria's Response to Teaching and Learning During the COVID-19 Pandemic. You see in the next slide, the COVID-19 situation has disrupted education, right? As we all know, it has disrupted both the global economy and our Nigerian economy. In the world, about 1.2 billion learners were out of school due to the pandemic. It affected 73.8% of the world school population. And in Nigeria, primary and secondary school students, about 36.4 million of those children were affected by school closures. And for us, this all started on the 19th of March, where the federal government of Nigeria approved the closure of schools and tertiary institutions. And this abrupt closure led to significant disruptions. So learning modes were disrupted, access to school-related services, parents' routines were disrupted, and everybody went into crisis management mode to ensure that children kept learning and that closure of schools did not lead to an end in the education process for children. And this led us at TEP Centre and NESG, as you see in the next slide, to come up with a research study. We drew on our competencies in education and economic research to study and report the education stakeholders' responses to learning in the wake of the pandemic, right? Our aim was really to analyze the responses of key education stakeholders and also understand how the learners and their parents were adapting to the new learning platforms. And so basically, from our report and our study, our research questions were centered around these four main questions. We wanted to understand what the immediate effects of the COVID-19 pandemic was on children's learning. We wanted to find out what innovations that were aiding learning from home were. Also, we're looking at what were the challenges that the learners and their parents were facing utilizing these learning platforms. And then also key issues around the implications of learning from home on the equality of access to education. And so those were our broad research questions. And we set to work to develop a research study, which we are launching today. No research studies without its limitations, and ours have come with its own limitations. We're only able to cover the first 3 months of the pandemic and subsequent closure of schools in Nigeria. We therefore cannot say how school or how learning would evolve in a protracted pandemic situation. So in 3 months' time, what has changed? We may not be able to say that from this report, right? And also our sample size being at 1,901, as was earlier mentioned, is quite small, right? But we still believe that it covers some key findings and that it holds potential to guide decision makers on key issues that can be addressed with remote learning. The other challenge that we find is that we cannot say anything about the people who did not respond to our survey. So if they were not learning, we cannot tell you what has happened to them in that situation. So our reports might be biased towards cases where learning was actually happening and stakeholders that were responding to learning. And so we can take learnings from this report to guide decision makers and stakeholders on how learning and policy can be implemented going forward. Next slide, please. So briefly about our sample size, we conducted the survey looking at 5 respondent categories: the parents, the teachers, the students, government officials representing the government, and private organizations, including some private schools. And a caveat here is the fact that the private schools that responded to our survey are those that were able to actually pivot into online learning and were implementing learning interventions during the period of the study. So we may not be able to say anything about the low-fee private school who has simply shut down and the students are not learning anything at that time. So we have 109 respondents in total, and we implemented phone interviews to supplement the online survey, just because we understand that some specific groups of people will not be able to access the survey online. And to enhance the reach of our survey, we added a phone interview component, which was basically the same questions, but was implemented with the help of a field researcher that was calling up respondents for us. As you see in the next slide, we were able to reach 35 states across Nigeria, and the numbers vary across the different states, which is also due to accessibility of these respondents, right? Lagos has the highest sample because of the urban nature of Lagos and the fact that more people in Lagos will be responding to learning, and our own access to these respondents within the state. But overall, we reached 35 states in Nigeria, and then it's spread across government, students, parents, and parents being the largest respondents category that our survey reached. Next slide, please. So from the findings of the survey, we are able to talk about some tools or platforms that were being some platforms that were used for learning over the period of our survey. When we asked the government respondents in our survey what the platforms that students were using in their states were, the responses we received were mainly around low-tech tools. So the government said the state government was implementing television learning programs, radio learning programs mainly. A few people said they were implementing offline tools, and a number of respondents said they had internet-based platforms for learning. Next slide, please. When we asked the private schools or the private organizations what the learning interventions were, majority of them were implementing learning interventions that had to do with social media, mobile applications, Google Classroom websites. So basically what we are seeing here is that most of the private organizations or schools were using platforms that were online, right? Implementing internet-based intervention
Hello.
that people have to
Yeah.
download
Oh,
an
okay.
application or use the internet to access these learning platforms. Next slide, please. For teachers, we asked them what tools they were utilizing for learning during the pandemic. Majority of our respondents were also using online tools like Zoom, social media, or mobile applications. So we see that majority were using internet-based tools to facilitate teaching for their children. Next slide, please. And then we asked the learners, the students, what platforms they were using. We saw things like online, they were learning online, they were using WhatsApp. Surprisingly, 23% of our respondents said they were learning via WhatsApp. Using mobile phones, and a few of them said television. But also the younger children were more likely to say that their parents were teaching them or they had home lesson that was helping them during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So these learning platforms I have just run through briefly are not without challenges. We came about some challenges that these parents and students and even the teachers were facing while they were utilizing these online tools. But first, we asked the government what were the challenges associated with providing education for children while they were learning at home. Um, they said majority reported that the lack of resources for students. So students access to digital tools, internet-based mobile phones or devices were some of the challenges. Getting access to student data, they reported, was one of the challenges in implementing learning while at home for children. On the next slide, you see that we put together the challenges from the people utilizing these learning platforms. So the students and their parents, and we really wanted to understand how they were faring with regards to learning from home. One of the key things that stood out from the findings of this research is that they had access, the access to digital devices and internet access was a major challenge. Some children just are not able to access these digital tools. Simple. They don't have the access to internet. They don't have access to a laptop or a mobile phone that has an internet enabled, that is internet enabled. And so this was one of the major challenges the parents and their children raised with regards to learning from home or learning during the pandemic. Another issue that was raised is the multidimensional aspect of access. And it is one thing to have a device that is internet enabled. It is another thing to know how to use it. It is another thing for your parents to be able to support you to join an online class or to watch an online video. So these are the challenges, and you might have an internet enabled device, but the network quality will just not let you access that learning. So children and their parents face multidimensional aspects of access to learning via online modules. And then we have electricity supply as one of the major challenges. So for children that were now using television to learn, or television programs, learning programs, a lot of people reported that while they were learning, power cuts was one of the major disruptions to their learning, and then they couldn't follow the programs through to the end just because there was no electricity to do so. Student concentration and the need for physical connection also came up strongly, both from the teacher's side and the parent side. Some of the children were just not able to focus on learning, watching a television or learning online. And then the teachers felt like there was a lack of engagement because the students are not able to interact with them physically. And this came up strongly across the respondents as well. Lastly, we talk about the financial implications of learning remotely. We found from this study that there are indeed financial implications. A device is needed, someone to teach the child while at home, internet access, electricity supply, or alternative sources of electricity. A lot of parents reported that the financial implications of learning was some of the reasons why they really couldn't support their children's learning at this time. So these challenges have obviously come up strongly, and this is one of these are the findings that our reports have been able to shed light on. On the next slide, we've talked about the challenges, and we can now, please can I have the previous slide, please? We can now say these challenges have their own implications, right? If one child has access and is able to, his parents are able to provide electricity, a tablet or a laptop, a conducive learning environment with a table and a desk, a chair, a lamp, a pen, and then there's another child who has to borrow a radio from his uncle or from his father and doesn't have a conducive environment and is seated on the floor with his books on his leg. That leads us to know that there are implications in terms of equality of access. Some children really can't learn the way they want to, while others are able to actually have everything they want to learn, despite the fact that they are learning remotely. And this has come up in our findings, and we think they are worth discussing and they are worth shedding light on. you see from the next slide that we asked the students what they need to learn the way they want to while learning at home. And we disaggregated this by government and private school just to see if there are any key differences that stand out for us. While the key analysis used in this research is mainly descriptive, we have not really done inferential analysis here, but we can already see very very good differences that show us that this might actually have key implications that we need to discuss and work on. So if you look at the graph here, we asked them what they need to learn from home, the way they want to learn. And we can see that a group of students have said they need nothing. That is, they have everything they need to learn at home. And then when we disaggregated that by government and private schools, we can see that the people who need nothing more are more likely to be private school students as opposed to a child in a government school. Then when we go down to laptop or computers, right, the numbers are higher for those in government as opposed to those in private school. And when you see the report, we have disaggregated the students by private and government schools, and they are roughly 50-50%. So this is not a case of private school students being more than government school students in our sample. It's actually a 50-50% case, and we are seeing differences across the needs that this group of children have. So this already leads us to the fact that there are implications of learning from home, that some groups of students might face disadvantages that other groups of students do not have. So you see in the next slide, we also asked their parents similar question. This was not disaggregated, but this just highlights that there are some key things that are needed to enable children to learn from home. A laptop is very important. Internet access is important. If I can't have a laptop, I need a phone that is internet enabled, or a tablet that is internet enabled. Some parents have said their children need radio, electricity, learning materials, and 18% said nothing, which is fantastic. But there are needs that need to be met for children to learn the way they want to learn at this time. Next slide, please. So we then asked the parents about, so you're learning, your children are learning, can you rate the effectiveness of these learning platforms? And this was some of the findings that we got from the parents in particular. 38% of the parents said they rated these learning platforms good. 21% said very good, 3% were neutral, 7% said poor, and 1% said very poor. We went on to ask them the reasons for their ratings, and we looked at just 2 examples in the next slide. And one parent that said that the learning platform was poor, and the reason she gave for this is there is no money to keep buying airtime for the television programs. There is no power, and for the television programs, there is no power supply. So she cannot keep buying data, right? Or airtime for her child to watch these programs online or on a website or via the internet. And then when you put on a television program, there is no power supply. We looked at the response of another parent whose child attended private school, and the parent is a master's degree holder. She supports her child's learning, and she gave the rating a 5 and said it's very good. And we asked why. And she said the older kids are very engaged and relish the opportunity to connect with their teachers and classmates. The assignments were easily assessed and completed, and they were graded immediately. They watched videos and answered questions. And we looked more into her responses, and we saw that her children attended private schools. They were using Google Classroom. They have used the platform before, and she's able to support them. She's a master's degree holder. They live in Abuja. And so we already see that there are differences in the way people are approaching learning, in how they are adapting to learning, and the things that they need for their children to learn. This is evidence that not everyone is learning at the same pace, not everyone is learning the same way, and not everyone has the tools to keep learning even in this pandemic. Next slide, please. So we then asked the parents, I'll run through this very briefly because I'm aware that my time is fast spent already. we asked them what kind of support they need, and we've been able to categorize this support into 3 different categories: palliatives, reduce internet costs, stable electricity, subsidized tuition fees, financial support, free education materials, provision of devices like laptops and computers. Next slide, please. And the next slide, we talk about curriculum or pedagogical support that is needed at this time. Things like to extend the duration of classes in the areas where they are being broadcasted on radio and television. The parents have said they should extend the duration. They tend to be too short. Children miss out because of electricity supply and all of those issues. Redesigning learning platforms to make them easier to follow for children who do not understand how to use this platform. They want easier ways for them to be able to access them and follow through with them. And then pedagogical support materials for parents. Some parents simply do not know how to teach their children because they do not know how. They are not teachers. And we found out in our survey that a percentage of parents said they are not supporting their children because they simply do not know how to. So parents do need support in terms of the pedagogy and how to actually teach their children. In the next slide, we talk about specific interventions. People would like for schools to be safely reopened, right? So that children can go back to school. Underserved children need to be need special focus on to ensure that they are not left behind. There needs to be collaboration and partnerships with the private sector to ensure that children are able to learn. Training for the schools and the teachers. There are some teachers that really need support to be able to teach the children while they are home. And an increase in awareness about online learning. Some parents actually do not know that there are programs online that they can find themselves and help their children learn while at home. Next slide, please. So with all this, we need to commend the responsiveness of both the government and the non-state sector. We implemented this survey a month into the lockdown, and we could see that a lot of interventions were happening. We were able to map quite a number of things that were going on at home, abroad, by the government, and we need to commend the efforts by the state governments, by the private sector, but there is more to be done. There are things that we can take away from the findings that we have conducted during this study. And so generally from the study, we have come up with a number of recommendations that we would like to put forward, and hope that the stakeholders in the sector are able to implement them to ensure that no child is left behind, and whatever gaps that have been created are being bridged as schools reopen or as learning continue. And one of those recommendations is the provision of infrastructure for remote learning. We have simply said from this survey, we found that the effectiveness of remote learning was hindered by infrastructural deficiencies, power supply, internet access, and all of those issues that restricted learning from happening the way children would have loved them to happen, even while at home. So we recommend that the relevant stakeholders need to intensify investment in accessible internet connection, stable electricity, and access to remote learning tools and devices to ensure that children are not left behind at this time. Another recommendation is that we recommend that the education stakeholders observe and understand the different learning platforms to be able to make evidence-based decisions, because these platforms all work differently and may complement each other, but without the research and without the evidence, they can't know which of them is more effective for learning at this time. So stakeholders should commit to monitoring and evaluating learning and the platforms that are being used so that there can be constant improvement and we ensure that children keep learning even in the pandemic or when the schools resume. Another key area that we are recommending is prioritizing teacher development and well-being. Teachers require pedagogical, financial, and infrastructural support, and we recommend that there is continuous investment in teachers' development. Teachers should not just be left alone because schools are not happening at this time, but education must continue, and so their development and their well-being are key to ensure that children learn the way they should learn. Keeping children safe online is another key issue that has come up from our study, and we recommend that security measures should be put in place to ensure that children stay safe while learning and that they are not exploited by online predators. And parents have to keep an eye on what their children are doing online to ensure that they are actually learning and are not being exploited. Other things like training and supporting parents are things that we recommend at this time so that parents can keep supporting their children as they have become very vital in their children's education while they are learning from home. Provision of increased support for organizations enabling learning. As we had said before, the non-state sector have been very proactive and have responded quite well during the pandemic, and continuous support will ensure that they can scale some of their operations. We asked this private organization some of the key things that they need to continue supporting education, and some of them have said financial support, right? So that increased support will ensure that they can scale their operations. But also there is a need for homegrown solutions because we understand that our context is different and we understand the infrastructural challenges, internet access, data. So finding solutions that require little data access, right, that will enable children even in low income settings access this learning are very important. So an increased support for these organizations have come up strongly as one of our recommendations. And lastly, we would say that decisively activating remote learning in tertiary institutions is one of our recommendations. We found from our study that most of the interventions have focused mainly on primary and secondary schools, and students in tertiary institutions, especially those in the states tertiary institutions, have not been learning from their schools, and most of them have had to find alternative learning platforms by themselves, and some people might actually be left behind in this process. So we recommend that more work needs to be done to ensure that the tertiary institutions are not left behind in this process of innovation and remote learning. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much for being here, and thank you for listening.
Great, thank you so much, Bridget, for taking us through the highlights of the survey. I'm sure that if you're like many of us, you know, in-house, some of the findings were surprising, but others were not. Others just simply underscored some of the hunches that we have had regarding how it is that children are able to learn or not able to learn, you know, during this time of a global pandemic. So thank you, Bridget, for that presentation. I know that some of our distinguished guests are asking if they will have access to the report, and the answer is yes. So at the end of this webinar, we will make sure that the report is uploaded on the website and links are sent to everyone who registered for the webinar. And from there, you'll be able to access the report and read it for yourself. So the time has now come for us to go into our exciting panel conversation where we're going to be talking about some of the broader areas that pertain to these findings and drawing on the experience of our distinguished panelists. And to moderate that session is a dear friend and a sister and a person who's really passionate, you know, about developing the education sector in Nigeria. Morayo is here with us. And Morayo, what I'm going to do, because this is an area of deep expertise for you, is I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Many people in Nigeria know that you're no stranger. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much.
And to take us into the discussion. So welcome, Mariah.
Thank you, Dr. Mo, for having me. So one of the reasons why I'm here, yes, I host the breakfast show on television, TVC. One of the reasons why I'm here is because I do some work for the Commissioner for Education in Lagos State as a project consultant for one of our technical partners working with Lagos State. So I do some work for them, and I've worked in the educational sector in very recent times. So that's one of the reasons why Dr. Mo thought I should be here as a moderator. So let's go right into it. We have quite a bit to cover. In no particular order, I'd like to introduce our special guests. We have Dr. Makailu Ibrahim. He's an education development expert and academic. He participated in the design and implementation of major English and Hausa reading interventions in Nigeria. He also taught applied linguistics in different Nigerian universities. He's currently the technical advisor for FHI 360 and lead on the RANA project. Very interesting project, I heard about that. And they provide technical managerial program support for sustainable reading policies in Nigeria. Welcome, Dr. Makailu Ibrahim. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yes. Up next, we have Dr. Joan.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, sir. Also, we have Dr. Joan Obiawe. Welcome, madam. So Dr. Obiawe is the executive chairperson of the Edo State Universal Basic Education Board, SUBEB, spearheading widespread reforms in the basic education subsector under the framework of Edo BEST, which is Edo Basic Education Sector Transformation. In the wake of the COVID-19, Edo SUBEB launched the Edo BEST at Home initiative, which is a multi-channel, child-centered learning approach that includes daily interactive audio lessons and self-study activity packets available online for free without data charges. An interesting one there. Welcome, Dr. Viawe. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is our very own Mrs. Abosede Omobalanle Adelaja. I say very own because I work with her. So Mrs. Adelaja is has held many strategic positions within the Lagos State educational sector. She was appointed Permanent Secretary of Lagos State Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture back in 2018, and later redeployed to the Ministry of Education in 2019. Mrs. Adelaja is a member of the Nigerian Institute of Management. She loves teaching young teenagers and helping the needy. Welcome with us, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education, Mrs. Adelaja. Welcome,
Good
madam.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Mariah.
Good to have you. Then our dear
Thank
brother,
you.
Mr. Oradam Otto. Oradam is, for the past 8 years, he had been directing the affairs of the Slum to School Africa, working with over 10,100 volunteers across 35 countries to provide educational scholarships and dozens of developmental support to over 87,000 children from 42 communities across Nigeria. In the wake of COVID-19, they launched their first virtual learning classroom studio in Africa, through which 108 children are learning with their tablets. Another 840 kids in 30 communities have been learning with their laptops. Welcome with us again, Mr. Orodam Otto. Hello, Oron.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Are you there?
Yeah, sure, I'm here. Good to be here, Mariah. Thanks for having me. And that was very beautiful and a very insightful report. And I'm looking forward to the panel conversation.
Great. So we have next Mr. Olalekon Adeko. He's a Microsoft Innovative Educator expert, seasoned educator, motivator, and social entrepreneur par excellence. He's the co-founder of TED Prime Hub and AdTech social entrepreneurs with projects like Codeliners, Edo Girls Can Be can learn code, Teach Right, and STEM Her, all to advocate for 21st century teaching and learning to promote STEM coding in schools. He has trained over 10,000 teachers in 19 states in Nigeria, represented the state and the country at international programs in Ghana, Mauritius, South Africa, Kenya, Dubai, Singapore, France, even in my village, United States. I'm just joking. Welcome with us, Mr. Adiako. Good to have you.
Good afternoon. So I'm happy to be here. It's my pleasure.
In fact, last but not least, we have with us Mr. Garba Tasil. He, right now, has been attending the Federal College of Education, Kano, for his NCE certificate. he is the coordinator. He's currently the state coordinator for Kano for the Concerned Parents and Educators Initiative, CPE, a volunteer-driven education advocacy network of 170,000 members on Facebook and 21 physical hubs, state chapters. During his career, Mr. Tasiu received different awards, one of which includes the Lifetime Achievement Award given to him by the Institute of Human Resource Development in Garki, Abuja. Welcome with us, Mr. Tasiu.
Thank you. Delighted to be on the program.
Good to have you, sir. Okay, so I'd like us to start with obviously our thoughts on the reports. I'm also quite interested in hearing Dr. Obiawe's views on the report, especially because I know she's actually initiated quite a bit of intervention from Edo Best. So let me start with Dr. Obiawe. In your view, Dr. Obiawe, does the reports we heard earlier, does it confirm what you already know about learning in this new normal we call this period?
Thank you. I want to first appreciate Dr. Mo Defeso and her team at the TEP Centre for inviting us to participate in this very interesting conversation. And also on the release, I was able to go through, and it was quite illuminating. And then also the presentation that was done was also quite enlightening as well. So the findings of the findings of the research, I think, aligns well with what we already know, particularly for us in Edo State. I think we all can agree that COVID-19 happened upon all of us, caught us unaware, and in a sense, there was sort of a scramble to put something meaningful for pupils and students to be able to learn. For us in Edo State, it wasn't just about just having something for the sake of having an alternative source of learning. It was also about having, there needed to be a method to the madness, so to speak. And so for us, we looked at, we decided to focus only on online learning with adequate online and offline support. And we didn't want to do TV and radio because, again, from some of what was highlighted in the report, about electricity, having power, and all that. For radio, it was the same thing, and the challenge of even tracking how many of your pupils and students would be utilizing this learning through this medium. So we just, in Edo State, we focused on uploading the content online, developing content that would give every child at least 4 hours of learning every day, and we made it asynchronous. So that way, even if the parent had to go to work, when they come back in the evening, they can make their smartphone available for their child to learn. So there's a lot to talk about what we've been doing in Edo, but I don't want to go on and on.
Yeah. We'll come back to that, but let's hear from Lagos State also. Mrs. Adelaja, could you give us your thoughts on the reports, and if it confirms what you already know from what you're doing in Lagos State?
Yes. To a large extent, I want to align with the reports, even though there are some areas I need to expatiate. Like the chairman Subeb Edo Best has said, in Lagos State, this lockdown came as a surprise to everybody. It wasn't anything expected. But trust Lagos, no matter the time, Lagos State will always come out with something. So we came out and we realized that we cannot use one size shoe to fit all. So in Lagos State, what we have is blended learning, using so many platforms. We have the radio program for primary school, for junior secondary, and for senior secondary. we make sure that the stations are not the same so that there will not be any form of interference. We have LTV radio, LTV Echo FM radio for senior primary, Radio Lagos for junior primary, Niger FM for GSS, and Wazobia FM for Wazobia DSTV station for senior secondary. In addition, we have Wazobia FM for senior, and we also have LTV for primary school. So this is just one leg of the online. The other legs, we have the WhatsApp group that teachers have created with their students to monitor them and to make sure they are following the online lessons. So each school, each subject teacher have his or her own WhatsApp group with his or her students. In addition to that, we have a co-excel intervention in the primary school, and we have our consultant, The Bridge. So they also joined, partnered with us, and they have their own online program too, of which content SUBEB moderated to make sure whatever they are teaching is in line with what we have in the state. So they have that, and it's still work in progress. The fact that schools are gradually reopening still doesn't mean we are going to stop. We are still going to continue, because for the primary school, we continue to review based on observations, based on reports received, even from other stakeholders. We continue to review upwards our processes. And this has even brought us to the level at the primary school. I want to introduce MP3 for our pupils to also support what is already on ground. In addition to that, for the secondary school, we have provided with support of private organizations, we provided Android phones, of which the curriculum, the scheme of work has been uploaded, and we've started distribution for our schools. That also is to support, so that if you missed out in one area, you can also meet up in another area. The Android phone is for the teachers and for the students. And it's also, all the subjects have been uploaded. Okay. And so it's customized, it's both offline and online, so that they can have access to internet. In addition to that, we have our social media, Twitter, YouTube, and so on, to make sure that whichever the case, the students and pupils are learning at every point in time. Thank you.
What the various states are doing, I mean, obviously, these are important feats that the Lagos State government has put in place for education. But my initial strategy is to get everybody's thoughts on the report, and we'll come back to what individual states are doing. Let me hear Dr. Mukailu. What are your thoughts on the report, your initial thoughts, and does it also confirm what you already knew about learning so far, especially in the North?
Okay, thank you, Morayo. Let me start by greeting the great panelists and other guests, as well as all the attendees here, and also expressing deep appreciation to TEP Centre and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group for conceiving the idea of rolling out this research. Overall, we need a lot more evidence in whatever we do, and I think this piece of study provides a lot of it. I certainly relate a lot with most of the findings of the study. I look at the research questions around the immediate effect of the lockdown, which for sure, when the announcement was made on March 19th, all the intervention states where reading and numeracy activity runner works complied with that, which means by next week on March 22nd, children did not go to school. Let me say that our project provides support to 9 states in northern Nigeria to promote reading, and all the states complied. So which means from that time on, schools remain closed and children remain at home. So I can see that dimension. Another instance is the study mentioned that there are states that are within the category of 1 to 2 weeks of providing response, and others that are within 3 to 4 weeks, and those that are 1 month and above. And I am pleased to also observe that the states we support belong to these categories in interesting ways. For example, Kano provided the first response on radio by April 15th, Bauchi by April 6th, and Niger by April, Bauchi by April 8th, and Niger by April 6th. So I see them within the earliest categories, and compared to a state like Kebbi, which we also support, which started the response in June 16th. So I see a number of connections in that regard, and there are a lot of innovations around the state, although the main intervention is radio, but there are a number of innovations that were put in place to maximize the outcome of the interventions, which I would like to mention when there's time to do so. So I really see a lot of connection. One last point is that this kind of interventions, most of the states are saying that they would like to continue even beyond the lockdown period, because the blended approach to learning has already been a trend before the coming of COVID-19. And but COVID has emboldened the kind of opportunities it brings, and they would like to continue with that even beyond that period. So this is really my perception. I see a lot of connection. There may be 1 or 2 things where I would like to pass my observations at the conversation. Thank you.
Very much, Dr. Mukailu. All right, so I'll move on to Mr. Garba Tasiu, because I know you work very closely with parents and educators, and you have a huge following on Facebook. In your own thoughts, the report, does it confirm what you already know based on the feedback you've gotten from parents and educators in your group?
Thank you very much. Let me begin by appreciating the TEP Centre for inviting the concerned parent and educators initiative to this program. In actual sense, all the findings and recommendations are in line with what we are thinking, what we are thinking. Actually, COVID-19 has come with a great distraction to education, educational activities. And at first, many parents are so worried at the beginning of the lockdown. Their children are at home, they're doing nothing, they are not learning anything. There's even no chance to take them to learn trade because all businesses are closed. So the parents are worried. But God so kind, later on, these kind of interventions begin to come in. And the parents were very happy. As Dr. Mikael said, here in Kano, the major intervention come through radio and television programs. And these radio and television programs were run on both the television and the radio. And it covers some major subjects, the science subject and the English and mathematics. And it covers for both primary 1 to 6 and also secondary school 1 to JS and SS. So this have also happened here in Kano. Apart from this, there are also other interventions, mostly by private schools here in Kano. They organize WhatsApp programs for their learners. And also there is one program that is run here by the British, which is called Kalma. That program also provides a text message program to parents. They collected parents' number where they text some learning activities that have taken place before the COVID-19 lockdowns, and they ask parents to ask their children some questions. They post questions so that the parent can use the questions to check the learning of their children and keep them at least learning in one way or the other. So these are actually in line with what we know had happened. So the report is not a surprise to us actually.
Thank you very much, sir, for that.
Sure.
Yes, thank you very much. I would now like to hear from Mr. Olaleko Adieko, because obviously you've done quite a bit of work in STEM, working in with children, teaching them how to use, how to code and how to do quite a number of other things. In your view, when you heard about this report, do you think it's encouraging, especially in your own industry?
Thank you so much. I think a lot of the recommendations and the findings are in tandem with what we've seen here over the time. Because here in Ogun State too, we had a series of programs for students when COVID-19 started, from radio to television to the online platform and what have you. So aside the teaching on the radio, on the TV and on the website, we also did like a small an appraiser, like a survey for the student. We assessed whether they're actually following up with the learnings on the TV, on the radio, or on the website. And we wanted to know whether what we're doing, we should continue, whether students are actually following what we're doing. So we did like an assessment with some questions, survey questions. And at the end of the day, we had 17,551 respondents, basically SS3 students, because the assessment for SS was for SS3 students. And one nice thing about it is that we got responses from all the 20 local governments in the state. So this is to confirm that if our students have necessary tools, if they've got access to gadgets, if they've got access to internet, and they can actually learn, and they can actually do quite a lot. And one thing again that I will say is that I think internet penetration has really increased in Nigeria, because we had responses from, you were quick to mention 200 responses.
Sadeko, we're having trouble hearing you. We might have to reconnect with you. We're having trouble hearing you very clearly. But before we run up, let me hear Aaron. Aaron, are you there?
Hello. What happened?
Oh, Ms. Adeka, are you still there? We lost a bit of connection. Yes. Let me let you wrap up.
Okay. Okay. So as I was saying, the report shows that our students, wherever they had to, they can actually learn, and with the necessary tools, they can work. And what we did in Ogun State was to work with only the teachers themselves. So the teachers handle the content creation, and to support the findings of STEP, that our teachers need to be trained. So before the teachers could actually go on to create content, they were how to create e-content using simulations and what have you. So it's in line with the findings that we need to continue to train our teachers. We need to ensure that we sustain this remote learning thing. It shouldn't just end once COVID-19 ends. We should just embrace what we call remote learning, so that students get used to this. God forbid, if something like this happens again, we have something to fall back to. And even if something like this doesn't happen, then our students can continue to learn at home. So to support that, we've laid the foundation on our remote learning platform with all the 27,000 teachers in Ogun State on Office 365, so that they can continue to play with the e-content created, and they can continue to interact with the students.
All right, thank you very much. And let me now take Aaron's views. Aaron, I know you worked with quite a bit of communities. And you recently also launched the virtual learning in some of these communities. In your view, do you think the report also confirms what you've seen so far on the field?
Thank you very much, Morayo, and of course, thanks a whole lot to TEP Centre. That was a very brilliant report. I think you did a great job, and of course, we don't expect less from Dr. Mo and the team at TEP Centre. I think for us, when schools were shut down, one of the first things we did as well was to conduct a detailed survey. And so we had our community volunteers and our community teachers, or rather our teachers who were in schools but lived in the community across all the communities, participate in this survey. We were able to get about 1,300 respondents, both students and their parents. And the number of the things that we also confirmed in that report are very similar to what you had also confirmed. And so what we realized was that in the real sense, literally, what COVID-19 had just done was expose most of the weaknesses we already knew existed. You know, the inequality, the inequity, we could basically see it more exposed during this period. And there was literally no silver bullet. There was no one-size-fits-all approach, you know, that anyone across the world, I'm not just talking about in Lagos State or in Edo State or in Nigeria, but across the world, no one has actually found the best solution. We still see countries like even the United States and United Kingdoms even grappling for solutions. And so it's very impressive to see some of the things that states across Nigeria are doing to ensure that learning continues. And so one of the things we observed and one of the things we've seen is that the pandemic has actually united us as stakeholders, as educators, as development practitioners. It has brought us together. And we realized that it's really not even about competition, it's more about collaboration. How can we come together and work together? Because at the end of the day, it's a Nigerian child that we need to ensure gets the best education. And I think it's very important that we also start trying to figure out how to harmonize our various solutions and how to collaborate more. One of the things we observed when the pandemic actually started initially was that the children who come from underserved communities, and which is basically the demographic that we serve, they were extremely underserved. You know, a lot of these learners, a lot of these children still had to go out and hawk. And so when you realize that this is a lockdown, the child is at home, the uncles are at home, the neighbors are at home, everybody is at home, no one is allowed to go out, there were increased rates of abuse. So we saw even young girls in certain instances who were getting pregnant in some of the communities. And so it was very important that we found a way to engage them. You know, we've had so many people asking us, so what made you actually create the virtual classroom? And we actually wanted a situation where we could actually see that the child is learning and we can see the child in the classroom physically, even though they are remotely connected. Because when we started initially, we were sending resource materials to the children in their homes. We were engaging them with our volunteers and our teachers in the community and giving them various resource materials. But we could not even monitor to know if they were learning, if they were actually, you know, using those materials, if they were in class. And we wanted to actually be able to engage, because we've seen situations where a child doesn't come into class for 2 days and we know something is wrong. Or the child is supposed to be in class today and he or she is not there and we know that something is wrong. So we actually ensured that we created a platform, and the virtual learning classroom gave us the opportunity to engage every student actively. It also helped them collaborate because we started seeing situations where they were so isolated from themselves. We saw across the private schools and many private schools, they had remote learning, virtual learning, but these kids were still very underserved across the remote communities. And so it was very interesting. We had issues with power. And so we got power banks, we got community charging spots. We are currently building a solar kiosk in the communities to ensure that the children have access to keep charging their devices. There were issues around data. But the truth is, this conversation we are having is actually using the same data that these children use in most of their communities. And the reality is in most of these communities, there's also very good internet. And one of the things we have realized over time is that the future of education is actually going to be digital. So what the coronavirus pandemic did was just bring the future to the present. And as educators, it's very important that we start thinking of what the future will be. You know, we've seen lots of teachers complain that they are running out of business. But to be honest, this is the best time for teachers to actually start being innovative. The future of education would have teachers be, imagine, you know, I've always said this, and to be honest, this is a very interesting idea I want to put out there for educators here. Why can't we create an Uber for teachers where a teacher can literally sit down in their home and teach 1,000 learners across the world and get paid by the minutes? You know, and the truth is, education would no longer be monopolized. A student from Imakoko can get access to a Harvard course right from their community. We've seen with the cluster learning program how we educate children who would naturally not have gone into a classroom. And what we've also realized is that these programs are sustainable. Post-pandemic, many children will still learn. You know, we complain about 13 million out of school children who can't get access to education because there are no schools. But through cluster learning, we can have teachers in communities who are engaging children in learning. Learning, you know, we've confused education for schooling. And so we realize that, or we think that it's only when a child is in the classroom that child has the potential to learn. But children can still learn in communities. The most important thing is what's the content that we are actually delivering to them. How are we ensuring that our contents are harmonized? What's the vision for our education system? What do we want to achieve, and what's the methodology in delivering that content? You know, I think it's very important that these conversations are being had. I totally, you know, would align with the reports, and I believe that 20 years from now, we wouldn't be having and facing these challenges. And what we are doing today should not just be focused on today, but how can we ensure that it's sustainable? 20 years ago, most of us here never thought we were going to be having such a meeting. Many of us here never even had mobile devices, you know, but today we all have mobile smart devices. So in the next 20 years or 10 years, every child will have a digital device. Every child will be able to sit down and learn. One of the things we've realized is that these children can learn at their pace. In fact, even a faster pace. You give a child a digital device, he or she has finished the entire program in less than 3 days, and they're like, Auntie, what's next for me? But you know, we put 50 children in the classroom and they have to walk by the class teacher's pace.
Right.
Chapter after chapter, week after week. And we don't even care about the children who are slow learners or who cannot catch up. You know, the next week, everyone moves to the next class. And so you find that we keep judging monkeys by their ability to swim or fishes by their ability to climb trees. We are not ensuring that our education system is fit for purpose and every child is being, you know, handled as an individual. So I think that is an important period for us as educators to start having these conversations and collaborating more, because the future really of education is digital. Thank you.
I wanted to stay with you for a longer time, but I think I'll probably come back to you because I'm very interested in this virtual learning concept that you carried out. I've been in a lot of conversations with quite a few governments, and I know one of the major challenges they're facing is data. We're talking to the poor of the poor. Do they have power? These are some of the challenges. So it's interesting to hear that in your own outreach, you've been able to solve that problem. So we'll come back to how you're able to do that. But let me go back to Dr. Viawe. Dr. Viawe, I know you also try to work with some multinationals to provide data for your pupils in Edo State to make it easier. Could you give us an example of the interventions you had to do in Edo State, especially for the primary schools?
Okay, for primary school, we were actually fortunate to have a telecom provider. Oh, my video is not on. Okay. So we were fortunate to have a telecom provider, MTN, agree to support us with zero data access to our website, as well as free SMS. So that helped a great deal for parents across the state. For the teachers, we basically, initially we said, since they were working from home, so the cost of what they were saving from transportation was the first step towards data. And then as we moved along, they were also now given the opportunity to use the school monthly subvention to schools to buy data. Then for when we started, we basically, divided our state into geographical areas, urban, semi-urban, rural, remote, rural, riverine. So from these different locational categories, we're able to address the unique peculiarities. So for instance, some of our riverine areas, network is a problem. In some of our remote areas, network is also a problem. So in those areas, we had to come up with offline alternatives. The offline alternatives was having small clusters of learning centers in the community. So in the rural areas, for instance, where every child did not have access to smartphones, it was a common occurrence to see the community leader or the village head offering up their compound as a place where the children will congregate and the teachers would, continue to teach them offline. The other thing we also did for our pupils with special needs was because obviously online was not going to be an option for them, we did two things. Because in our public schools, the special needs children tend to come from low-income backgrounds, low-income families. And so for special needs, the first intervention was to provide palliatives. So we did more than the state government gave us the materials, and we provided more than what the state was providing to other people in similar economic conditions. In addition to that, we also now, based on the specific disability of the child, we now provided materials to enable them learn at home. So we just sort of went with the basic. We weren't trying to be over-ambitious with our special needs student population. By that, I mean, we gave them content that they could use, that they will be able to do on their own. Some of our kids that have development, for instance, we gave them crayons and drawing books and other visual materials that could stimulate learning. So for us in Edo, having that free data access was a big deal. By the end of the first month of online learning, we had over 1 million hits on our website.
Wow.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. That's impressive.
So, if you want, I could. I'm full of not taking too much time. So that's why I'm trying not to go on and on, but I have a lot to say. If you want me to keep going, just let me know.
No, I mean, it's okay. It's important that we hear from everybody else, but definitely we'll come back to you, Dr. Viawe. I think one of the critical factors is the parents, obviously, because I think somebody had mentioned about the pedagogical approach, how the parents don't even understand how to teach, how to support their children, their wards at home. I'd like to direct this question to Dr. Mukaila. In your own work you've done in the North, how have you been able to engage the parents in supporting the children home learning so far?
Okay. Well, overall, we look at this intervention from content perspective. How much content do you have to deliver? From dissemination or transmission perspective, you have the content. How do you deliver it to the learners and the parents as well? Because there is this convergence now. Then the third is monitoring and support. And I think this is what will respond to the question. The first, since there is no contact, the first step we took was to try to generate contacts of parents within our intervention schools. And we thought that would be easy by just walking into a school, talking to a head teacher and saying that, okay, there is an enrollment register, there is a daily register, and there is a contact. But that was not actually the reality. We couldn't get even 20% of contacts from schools. So we had to go into communities and begin to generate as many phone numbers as possible, asking parents where their children's call, and using Kobo Collect to key that into smartphones and going into our server. So as at now, we have 70,000 parents from parent a range of average of five kids, and that gives us an estimate of the number of children we are reaching. And what we do to support them is that we send text messages that relate to radio broadcast of the week, telling parents that, okay, this is the focus of learning this week, and these are the kind of questions you can ask children. It's actually just like what Madam Tasiu mentioned regarding Kalma. So those messages are sent out. And we also have a pool of master trainers who train schools based on certain competencies. And the key aspect of competency required of a teacher was the ability to manipulate a smartphone and actually having one. So that created a sort of, they meet up with that. So what we do is that we give them a sort of script of questions and a sort of support guidelines that when you call a parent from the pool of phone numbers we have, ask them questions around how they are listening to the radio programs, what are their challenges, and then provide some feedback. So these are the steps we take in supporting parents. And prior to that, also, we did a survey. It's a very small survey to find out whether the parents had facilities for following the programs. And we found that 74% of parents confirmed that they had radio to listen to lessons, and 11% confirmed that there were radios around them to listen to. We also asked them about what would be their preferred time of following the lessons to be broadcast. In that case, we gave categories from early morning 8 to 11, later morning hours from 11 to 12, and actually through the early afternoon, 1 to 2, and then the early evening hours, 4 to 3 to 6, and then late evening hours sometime after dusk. And they all gave their opinions. But we believe that that changes based on season. When we started in March, April, people are likely to be available at home in the beginning of rainy season. But when you go into May and June, when farms are active, then certainly there will be a shift in time priority. So I feel this is a form of support because you try to sample opinions regarding preferred time instead of just thinking that, well, this is the convenient time for all the parents. And as part of that survey, I would like to mention that 84% of the parents confirmed that they could support their children in literacy and numeracy. So this is our relationship with parents. Is dialogic, is interactive, and part of the script is asking them about challenges and what we can even improve about lessons and whether their perception about whether their children learn. Of course, we have not arrived at a confirmed way of making learning assessment because, of course, you can test reading comprehension, but there are aspects of reading, like letter sound recognition, like aspects of numeracy, number identification, and others that would be a lot hectic remotely. But the parents have good perception that their children are learning through the contents being broadcast.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Mokele, for that update on I'd like to go on to the PUMSEC Lagos State Education, Ministry of Education. You know that before the pandemic, there have been critical issues in the sector, in the educational sector. And I think as Oren had said, this all just came on us. We didn't plan for this. But so far, what have you learned from this pandemic? And how do we fix the entire educational structure that we have? What suggestion would you provide in how we move forward, given that we're in the digital world? Obviously, we have to have that blended learning, whether we like it or not. What have you learned so far with the pandemic, and how do we fix the educational sector going forward?
Thank you, Morayo. Actually, like what others have said, the issue at hand is where we are going. But pandemic brought it closer and faster to every one of us. Like the Boy Scouts motto that says, be prepared. I think COVID has opened our eyes to always be ready for such situations. You know, when Ebola came and it ended, we all relaxed, thinking that was the end. And now COVID-19 came up again. There is need for us to have a framework which we don't have in Lagos, neither do we have, even at the federal level. So there should be a framework to handle this kind of situation, so that whenever it comes up again, it will come as a surprise. And we are already working at that. But with the challenges and the issues, it's an unending one. And as you all know, free education, it has its own challenges, particularly when the state government has to carry all the responsibilities. We want to thank God for those that have come on board to support us in Lagos State, to partner with us. It's still work ongoing. It can never be fixed completely, because as we are fixing one side, another issue is emerging, and it makes the work continuous. But one thing I want to know is that we are already, for example, in the area of infrastructure, the Lagos State government has already established an agency that is called State Committee on Rehabilitation of Schools. That is SCRIPS. SCRIPS is already working and fixing schools. We also have Lagos State, we have Lagos State Infrastructure Management Agency. They also are fixing schools, particularly the ones that requires rehabilitation and then facility management. So those two areas, those two agencies are going to concentrate on infrastructure, while the ministry will concentrate on policy. In addition to that, we continue to have issues. For example, if you look around Lagos, you'll see them laying fibers all around. That is to improve the internet distribution and flow. That is another issue. Internet has been a major challenge, even with online. Even as we are having this program, we have seen what has been happening. But Lagos State government is not resting on its laurels. They are laying fibers to improve internet flow. And that's another way forward to make sure that online teaching and learning will no longer be disrupted. In addition to that, we continue to have capacity building, training and retraining for our teachers. We want to use the opportunity to thank TEP. During the lockdown, they collaborated with us and we organized training for our teachers, scenario planning post-COVID. That is to prepare our teachers that when school finally reopens, we are going to have different challenges that will be emotional, physical, and otherwise, that the school management should be prepared to handle the various situations that may arise. In addition to that, the homegrown feeding is not going to stop, because we believe in the nourishment of our children. A healthy child is a wealthy child, and it will be easier for them to learn. So the issue of homegrown is not going to stop at the primary level to make sure that these children are feeding very well. Another thing that Lagos State is doing is, like others have said on the data thing, we are introducing MP3, MP phones, MP gadgets, sorry, for our primary school. That has nothing to do with data. There is to use memory card, and this will be preloaded. That will address the problem of data to some extent. And also, we have, like somebody mentioned earlier, through the running cost they have been given, Lagos State government this year, they have increased the running cost they give to schools. And that has helped them to accommodate giving some amount to teachers to get data for the various programs they are doing in their respective schools. In addition to that, the Lagos State government also provided data and even gave the teachers that were handling the online programs some honorarium to encourage them and to make sure the work continues. Lagos is also even moving forward in the area of infrastructure. We are already working on establishing an educational radio station that will be 24/7 to make sure that come what may, our children, our students, they are learning whenever they tune in to this station. Thank you.
All right, so interesting points there from Lagos. Let me come to Mr. Garba Tasiu, because you've done quite a bit of work in monitoring and evaluation. So we've heard a lot of great initiatives from all over, MP3s, we have the radio programs, television. How do we evaluate that learning has occurred? That's a major problem. I mean, this last semester was almost like an experiment for many parents. Nobody understood what was happening. People just managed the situation. But in your view, as someone who's been in monitoring and evaluation, how do we evaluate if indeed learning has occurred, especially in this last term that we just finished?
Thank you. My camera is off.
You can turn it on.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can see you now.
Okay. In fact, the issue of assessing the learning at this period of time is a major challenge with these new initiatives. A lot of a lot of people feel that learning, assessing learning is very difficult. For example, if you take the radio programs as an example, there is very little way of getting back information from the learners or maybe assessing what has been learned. So the same thing with all other initiatives that has been in use during this COVID-19. So in fact, as assessing and evaluating learning is very minimal, actually. Apart from that issue of Kalma, who used to send questions to the parent to ask learners, and even in that one, they don't have a way of getting back the information. Most of the parents do not call back to tell them their findings or what is happening as far as the learning is concerned. So actually, assessing learning in this kind of situation is very limited, not all that comprehensive actually.
Right. Okay, let me ask the same question to Mr. Adeyeko, because I know you've done quite a bit of online work in Ogun State. Let me hear your thoughts. Have you been able to assess if learning took place, and what has been the review so far? Especially also, what cadre of pupils were you working with? Was it private schools? Was it public schools? How do we know that indeed the initiatives that Ogun State put together actually helped with pupils this period? Adeyeko, are you there?
Thank you so much. To start with, we work with yes, I'm here. So we work with both public and private, no discrimination, because the programs were even here on public radio, public TV, and the website it's available to everyone. So talking about assessing or getting feedback from students. So initially the state government said they wanted the TV and radio. But we came up and said, what about students that won't be able to come online, or maybe due to power outage and what have you, they couldn't follow up with the radio or the TV. So we added the internet, the website part of it. So we created a website, and all the content on radio and TV are uploaded on the website. And there's opportunity for students to give feedback every day. So on the average, we receive about 271 responses from students every day, maybe as in a response to questions during the lessons and what have you. So after the first 6 weeks of hearing the programs on TV, because we actually started March 24th or so. So we decided to conduct a statewide assessment for the student using technology. So on the website, we got the teachers to submit their questions based on some of the topics that were actually taught on the TV and on the radio and on the website. So I fed that into the website and put it on our website. And the state announced it on different platforms for only SS3 students. The first assessment was for SS3 students, while the second assessment was for SS3 and GSS3 students. So the first time, it was for only SS3 students across different departments, whether science or arts or commercial. So they attempted 60 questions for 5 basic subjects, depending on their department. So at the end of the day, we had 17,551 responses from all these SS1 students, 8,000 plus from public school, 9,000 plus from private school. We even had 809 responses from students outside Ogun State, even as far as from Netherlands and
Mr. Diako, we're having a bit of trouble hearing you. Okay, Mr. Diako, if you can hear me, we can't hear you anymore. Okay, I guess I'll have to move on to the next person. I'll come back to you, Mr. Diako. I'd like you to finish that thought. Mr. Diako, are you still there? Seems like you're about to connect back with you. Okay, let me move on to Autumn. Mr. Oron, are you there? Now, I'm very, very interested in the virtual learning you talked about earlier, because if there's anything that I found has been a challenge in many corridors, is the fact that the only barrier to many initiatives is that the poor people, the poor communities cannot afford anything virtual. They can't afford data, they don't have power. And you're now telling us that you're actually carrying out the virtual classes in these poor communities. We are interested in how you're doing it and how effective has it been so far?
Thank you very much. I think for us, that was one of the first things, you know, we realized as well. Like I said earlier on, you know, the pandemic actually exposed a lot of the inequalities. And so as an organization, at the core of all that we do is ensuring that we bridge the gap, ensuring that we give every child an opportunity to get the best. And so wherever we even build our learning centers or our early childhood development centers or our STEM and innovation labs, whether it's in a remote community, irrespective of the community, we always try to ensure that it has the same standard as you will find in a Corona, as you will find in the British International. We want to ensure that children get the best. And literally, or in reality, that is what our education system should actually, you know, be focused on, ensuring that there's equity to a great extent and equality, where children do not have privileges because they come from rich families or attend rich schools. And so when we wanted to provide a solution, the question, which is always the question at the back of our mind, is how do we give these kids the best? We've seen our learners across communities excel so well, even when they go for competitions with children or students who come from the best schools. And we try to make them always have a huge sense of self-esteem. We have over 3,000 learners under our scholarship program across various communities. And so the question for us was, how do we keep them learning? And when we saw a number of students across the private schools using digital tablets, we asked ourselves, why can't these kids also have the same? And so the question then, or the response then for us let's find a way to get them digital devices. And interestingly, we started putting our plans together after we had conducted our survey within the community. We had a plan, we communicated with a few of our partners. Interestingly, one of the first partners, ESPN, we're very excited about the fact that we wanted to give digital devices to these students across these communities. And so they provided 50 devices. We had a little capital as well, Mrs. Tokumbo Ismail, who was also very, very excited about the project with Baker State. And they also came in with the support. And so we had the digital devices. Now, giving these learners these digital devices was not the only bottleneck. How do we ensure that we can actually even ensure that they are learning? They are on the devices. They are not using the devices for something else. They are not watching the wrong videos. They have internet connectivity. They have electricity. So I know you have 1,000,001 questions, but we can always provide you with documents that show you all the answers to these questions. We were very intentional about ensuring that the gap was bridged. And so for internet connectivity, we provided data for them, and we're still providing data for them. We are looking at collaborating with the telcos, which, to be honest, I believe that it should be, we need to intentionally start ensuring that our businesses, as for-profit organizations, put people before profits, put purpose before profit. And the coronavirus pandemic has also made a lot of people become socially responsible, which is really great. We want to see more of that. And so we're looking at telecommunications companies that will be intentional about providing data for students for free, or basically subsidized. We had issues with power connection or electricity in some communities, and we had to provide power charging kiosks. We are looking at installing solar power charging kiosks at the moment with a few other partners. We provided power banks, which are usually charged by our community volunteers, and these students have them in case they want to charge their devices. So we are addressing the issues in a multifaceted way. And we are seeing a huge improvement. Microsoft came on board, and gave us 1 million licenses for free for students. In fact, right now, we have never used up to 1%. Right. And excitingly, we have a program which is...
I need to bring in our guests to ask a few questions, because I think you've tried to answer the question, although there's still a part of how do you scale up. It's great that you got 50 devices, but we're talking about large communities. So we'll come to that, but it's important.
Well, I can take that quickly. I can take that quickly. So we have 2 programs, like I had mentioned. We have the virtual learning and the cluster learning program. The virtual learning program is for senior learners, so the secondary school learners. And we also have some students in the university who we support as well. And so that program is for them. The cluster learning program, which is a very interesting program, is for the younger learners. So the early childhood, the primary schools students. And so what we did was we already have teachers who are in a number of the schools we support. And instead of laying these teachers off, we got the teachers and assigned 30 students to each teacher. And because we also did not want to cluster children, we didn't want children gathered to learn, we ensured that the teachers were teachers who already lived around students in particular neighborhoods. So we did a very detailed mapping and mapped out about 35 of our teachers across their communities to engage with the students. So these teachers were all given laptops. And through the laptops, we can engage with the students, with the children across the communities. Interestingly, we are currently having conversations with a lot of development partners, including UNICEF, on how we can scale that program, because we've seen that through that program, a child doesn't necessarily have to sit in the classroom to learn. So I'll look forward to answering more questions around this and seeing how we can share information with other practitioners to scale the impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so at this point, I'd like to open the floor to our participants to send in their questions. I know there's quite a bit already. in the chat box. And if you do have a question, you can raise your hand and then the admin will unmute you so you can ask your question. So do we have anybody whose hand is raised, or do I go to the chat box and start? It's quite a bit of questions. Let's find one here in the chat box.
I think some have been sent to your phone, to your mobile phone.
Okay, there's one that says, what creative management can we make to students? So can we make to students in the hard to reach or low, sorry, I didn't get that. I'll have to take another one. How do you monitor or ensure learning is taking place on radio broadcasting? That's another important question because quite a number of states have adopted radio. And that's probably one of the reasons why Lagos State is probably finding other options in addition. But somebody's talking about blended learning. How are you evaluating that? Who would like to take that? Dr. Via, you want to start? Dr. Via, are you there? Did you get that? Okay. Anybody else? Lagos State.
Yeah. Hello.
Go ahead, madam. Go ahead.
You can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So yeah, for us in Edo, as I mentioned earlier, we are not doing TV and radio just because it will be difficult to access learning. So what we've done in our case is two things. We send out daily quizzes to pupils through WhatsApp. All our schools have virtual classrooms that we monitor. And then also our quality assurance officers are allotted a cluster of 20 schools to monitor. And so the quality assurance officers, they go into the virtual classrooms to observe what is going on. In addition to that, they also then randomly select a few of the pupils and parents from each virtual classroom. And then they call them and they ask them a set of questions. In addition to what the quality assurance, the monitoring that the quality assurance officers do, we also have our learning and development officers. Their role is to observe how the teachers are delivering the lessons to strengthen the pedagogy, so to speak. And so we have also extended our usage of technology beyond just our website and WhatsApp to Zoom. So using Zoom, the learning and development officers also provide constant training and support to our teachers. Then we also have the social mobilization officers. Their responsibility is really geared towards parental and community engagement. So they also follow up in the communities offline to say, okay, particularly for those children that are learning offline, so we have different sets of instruments that we are using to measure. And one of the highlights for us so far is our daily quizzes that we send to pupils that parents and pupils can access to test their knowledge of the content that they are having access to on a daily basis. So we are finding now that having a very active quality assurance unit is helping us to see to identify what our challenges are, identify what is working for us, as well as identify the areas where we need to improve upon.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello? In Lagos State, hello?
Can hear you. Yeah,
hello? Okay. In Lagos State, the schools are closed, but the teachers still show up. The school managers, they still show up. So what some of the teachers do is to go into the community to observe what is happening. And then we also made use of the SBMC, particularly at the primary schools, to give us feedbacks of what is happening in their communities. And that was what has led us to the introduction of MP3. Since we realized that, then we also bought radio. Then we realized that some of these children are not having access. Apart from that, the quality assurance too, they also go out. Honestly speaking, I would say the monitoring has been 100%. For the radio, on Fridays, we create time for phone-in session on the television and radio. Phone-in session that parents and students can ask questions, and with the support of First Bank, they give out radio. So many of these students are always eager to participate, to answer questions. It was even through that we realized that this program was not only that is not only Lagos State schools that are participating, that students from other states are also participating, because when they phone in, they will ask their name, the state they are calling from, their school, the class, and they will answer the question. So the kind of evaluation we have been doing is that after we have the lesson, then on Fridays, they also do that kind of quizzes. Apart from that, the teachers ask questions through WhatsApp to know what is happening, and they receive responses from their students. But I will still say it has not been 100%. And that is why we continue to evaluate to see where we can improve. And that was also what led us. It was as a result of the feedbacks that led Lagos State to introduce the Android phones, which is both offline and online. It's more of offline to avoid distractions, but they gave them data through MTN to help them in case they want to research or they want to find out some information on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. I have an important question for Mr. Otto, because quite a number of people are quite interested in the virtual learning and the cluster learning you talked about. Somebody said, how does it work? Is the tutor physically present to teach, or does the tutor use a teleconferencing video to Zoom? So people obviously want to know how that teleconferencing works, and I think it's an opportunity to share that knowledge with us. And after that, I'll go back to someone else.
I think we should host a master class because we won't finish today.
Oh, let's share some knowledge. Yeah.
But to be honest, I think the only beauty, one of the major beauties of the virtual classroom is the fact that you can interact with the students and have them really engaged like they're in a physical classroom. Now, when the pandemic started, and I think I've said this before, we actually didn't just want to give the learners digital devices because we would not be able to ascertain that they would actually be in class. We had children who were going out to hawk. And so you give them a device, but they're still hawking. And so we told the parents of this, in fact, all 1,000 plus learners we have currently on the virtual and the cluster learning program, all the guardians and the parents signed consent forms that they would allow their children participate in the programs. And so what we did in return was provide palliatives, which we do bi-monthly to the family. So the children do not have to go out to talk. And we are doing this in collaboration with various other partners. Now, these students can wake up in the morning, by 9 o'clock, they're in class. So they all have their groups, even on WhatsApp or the Microsoft Teams. Microsoft, like I mentioned, gave us 1 million licenses for students and 500,000 for teachers. And so all that the learners are doing, you can monitor them right from the control room. And this could basically be scaled to 1,000 to 10,000. In fact, yesterday, Microsoft increased the platform to 20,000 students per time. So it's a complexity I believe we can still have. Initially, we were working on building our own platform, which is something we're still doing. But Microsoft was very gracious to come on board and give us the Microsoft Office 365, which the learners are currently using. And we're looking forward to even collaborating with the Lagos State Ministry of Education to see how we can support them in various ways. We will share that information in the coming days. I think it's a very interesting way of learning. We noticed that there were just about 3 schools across the world that had virtual classrooms. That was the Harvard Business School. And so when we started the conversation, we realized that it cost them over $5 million to build it. And so we definitely did not have that amount of money. We looked at other schools across the world that had built virtual classrooms like that. And we engaged all the people who built those classrooms. And through the learnings which we got from them and through a lot of local knowledge, we were able to build ours. And of course, we're going to be sharing all of that knowledge.
I'm sorry I have to cut you off at this time because we want to end this webinar on time. I do apologize. But just like you said, we need a master's class because obviously a lot of people are interested in your own solutions, especially because you're working with poor communities, which is a major challenge for many, many organizations.
And we'll be glad to share all of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'd like to thank all our panelists for being here. Dr. Makailo Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Dr. John Obiawe, I know you very well, but you don't know me, but I thank you so much. We admire you from afar. And our PAMSEC Minister of Education, Mrs. Abosede Adelaja, thank you very much. Mr. Orodam Otto, thank you again. And we have Mr. Lale Konadeko from Ogun State, thank you very much. And Mr. Garba Tassiu, thank you very much for sharing your wealth of knowledge on this very important event. I do appreciate what's been great monitoring and moderating this conversation. And I'll hand over to our able host, Dr. Mo.
Wow, Mariah, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. There are so many questions in the chat box. There's so many questions in the Q&A that we've tried to answer, but I think it's just a testimony to how interesting this exercise is and how incredibly relevant the conversation is for the times that we're living in. I think that in order for us to know where we're going, we also have to reflect on where we're coming from. And so as we think about doing what I think Dr. Ijoma Nwagu refers to as building back better, it's important for us to know what it is that we want to build. And in articulating where we're going as a country in terms of our educational system, we have to reflect on where we're coming from and be brutally honest about the challenges that we are facing and the opportunities that present themselves as well. And so we know that disruption is always an opportunity to test resilience. And in that regard, I think it's really important to commend everyone that participated in this conference and also those that responded to the survey, because everyone had something to say. And all of these perspectives point to one glaring picture, and that is that Nigeria is in pole position to be a truly resilient country. In spite of the challenges posed by the pandemic, governments from across the country, and many people may not realize that this study was actually, has respondents from 35 of our 36 states. Governments from across the country, private sector organizations, private schools, even parents, everybody pulled their weight and determined that children would learn something, even if not much, but at least they would learn something and there would not be a learning slide. So the question is, so are children learning during the pandemic? And I think that the answer is some children are. And there are many reasons for this. For the many that are not, it is important for us to begin to think very deeply about how we're going to close those access gaps and how we're going to close the equity gaps as well as the quality gaps as well. Rethinking our curriculum and how we deliver the curriculum. And what we've talked about today, how do we assess the curriculum? If we're going to evolve a new kind of thinking around our curriculum that puts us in a position to be competitive as an economy, what sort of curriculum should we be looking at and how should we plan to assess it? We have to think about how to better support teachers in their own professional development. We have to think about funding. How do we resource all these incredible innovations that are coming to the fore in these days? How do we resource those? How do we partner with different organizations, whether in the public sector, the private sector? How do we support parents who are the de facto teachers at this point in time for many of our children? How can we better support them? And ultimately for us as TEP Centre, and I think I can speak for NESG in this regard as well, evidence has to become central. We really do have to begin to prioritize the collection of data rigorously and also making sure that that data becomes evidence for policy making. I think that ultimately what I would say is that equity and empathy must be at the heart of our response if we're truly going to come out of this bigger and better and stronger as a country. And so on that note, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone that collaborated to produce this report that you're all going to receive in the next day or so. You will all receive a link to download the report. The colleagues at the NESG, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, you have been wonderful, and we thank you so much for your support. I must thank my colleagues at TEP Centre who have labored over this exercise as well. Our audience, you've stayed with us up until now. How can we say thank you? Your comments and your questions are so insightful. And I think that, again, it just speaks to the kind of quality of people that we truly are in this country. We have guests that have joined us from across the world, Africa and beyond. Thank you very much for being here. And a special thank you for people that may not even be on this call, 1,901 respondents who took the time either to talk to us on the phone or to go online themselves and fill in the survey. Many people experienced technical challenges even doing that, but they forged ahead and they pushed through. Thank you so much for doing this. And again, thank you to everyone for your time. We will make sure that if you're registered for this webinar, that you do get a copy of the report. And we look forward to continuing this exciting conversation. And who knows, maybe there will be a learning in the pandemic part 2. Thank you all very much, and God bless you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you so much.
Well done, Mo. Congratulations and well done for the great job. And thanks for having us. Bye.
Thank you. We're grateful. And Morayo, thank you.
Let me use it.